Good evening, you're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. A school flag raising controversy sparks calls for clearer guidelines. The government gives the green light for the toddler version of BioNTech vaccines. And victims of the Bali bombings are remembered 20 years after the atrocity. The government has been urged to set clearer guidelines on penalties after a school suspended students for showing disrespect to the national flag. Police, meanwhile, expressed concern that a cartoon in a newspaper could mislead readers. Macy Mock reports.
A controversy erupted after St. Francis Xavier School in Chunwan suspended 14 students for 3 days for showing disrespect by not attending the flag-raising ceremony. Tang Fei, a lawmaker and education sector representative, told a radio program that the Education Bureau should set clearer guidelines on the penalties a school can impose for violations involving the national flag or anthem. He said currently schools are not told what kind of actions would require specific punishment. Education Bureau guidelines say suspension is not the appropriate way to treat a misbehaving student. But Tang believes that suspension is not as harsh as a demerit because this can affect a student's future. Police, meanwhile, wrote to the Chinese language newspaper Mingpao, expressing grave concern about a satirical illustration it published yesterday. The drawing by the artist, who goes by the name Sun Zi, depicts 2 riot police officers asking a principal what kind of trouble her students got into. Her list included carrying a laser pen in a school bag, butting heads with a teacher, and losing an eraser. Police said the illustration could damage the force's reputation by giving the public a false perception on how officers deal with calls for assistance from schools. Officers clarified that St. Francis Xavier School had alerted police because the sign on its front gate was damaged, and not for students' misbehavior. Zunzi said the cartoon was not meant to target police, adding that schools should exercise patience when teaching students. Mingpao pledged to continue providing readers with accurate and credible news. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The government has approved the emergency use of BioNTech vaccines for younger children. At present, BioNTech jabs are only administered to those aged 5 and above. The Health Secretary authorized the use of the pediatric and toddler formulation of the vaccine after an advisory panel agreed that the benefits outweigh the risks. The government said its discussions with the vaccine manufacturer are progressing well, and it's now waiting for confirmation on the supply of the shots. Hong Kong today added 4,788 COVID infections, 368 of which were imported. 9 more people died from the virus. The head of a group that fights for patients' rights says the court will discuss whether Health Secretary Lo Chung-mau has the power to invalidate over 20,000 vaccination exemption certificates. The certificates were supposed to be nullified today, but the High Court issued an interim injunction. Hong Kong Patients' Voices Chairman Alex Lam believes the court will discuss next week whether the health minister has the power to invalidate over 20,000 vaccination exemption certificates. Yesterday, the High Court imposed a temporary ban on the government decision to cancel the certificates issued by 7 doctors who allegedly did not conduct proper medical examinations. Lam said, at the case management hearing prompted by a judicial challenge, the judge appeared to think that Health Chief Lo Chung-mau doesn't have the power to cancel the certificates. The patient's advocate said some people who acquired the documents encountered difficulty in getting new ones, as many doctors were unwilling to issue them for fear of getting into trouble.
I made contact with the the Hong Kong Medical Association, I suggested to have a list of doctors or clinics who are willing to provide the service to patients. But the answer is no, because it's too sensitive.
Lam is worried that many people would not be able to get a certificate later, although they legitimately need them. Microbiologist Ha Pak Leung meanwhile said the number of people in Hong Kong with at least one contraindication for Sinovac or BioNTech vaccines is low, so there wouldn't be tens of thousands ineligible for the jabs. But he suggested that the government acquire a third type of vaccine to promote vaccinations. Civil Service Chief Ingrid Yeung said the ban on civil servants holding suspect certificates from entering government premises has been suspended in accordance with a court order. The government has been urged to establish a time frame to eliminate subdivided flats. In a DAB survey, 70% of the 600 people questioned said until subdivided flats become history, the government should see that their design is improved. In the interim, the party called for the building of more transitional housing. The DAB said the chief executive should use his policy speech next week to address the problem of subdivided flats. Deputy Chief Secretary Chek Wing-hing has given Eastern District a nod of approval after a random spot check on street cleanliness. He noticed that fewer litter bins were overflowing and less rubbish was lying on the streets. Macy Mock reports.
Deputy Chief Secretary Chek Wing-hing praised the improvement in Eastern District since the government began tackling hygiene black spots 2 months ago. Writing on social media, he revealed that he walked 21 kilometers yesterday to check on the progress. He gave Shao Kei Wan Main Street East, where he started his trek, 8 marks out of 10 for being extremely clean. Chek said overall, streets in Eastern are cleaner, with less rubbish on the ground and fewer rubbish bins overflowing. While there were fewer obstructions on the streets, he singled out Chun Yuen Street in North Point for having illegal shop front extensions. Chek said Electric Road near Fortress Hill Station remains dirty, but it was better elsewhere, with fewer cigarette butts and chewing gum stains. He noted the improvement on Lau Sin Street, where people used to feed pigeons. Chek ended his tour in Kennedy Town after 4.5 hours. Next on his list is Kowloon District, which he will inspect on Sunday. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Overseas, the Indonesian resort island of Bali has marked the 20th anniversary of the twin terrorist bombings that killed over 200 people. Most of the victims were tourists. Some of their loved ones visited Bali to remember them. Winna Wong reports.
Bali, normally a haven for tropical holidays and relaxation, turned into a nightmare on this day 20 years ago. That was when explosions ripped through 2 of the island's most popular night spots, killing 202 people and injuring 209 more. Survivors and victims' family members gathered in the resort today on the anniversary of the carnage.
Every day I remember what happened 20 years ago. I'm incredibly lucky to have been able to walk out of the Sari Club where 202 people couldn't. It's a time to remember, but also to celebrate life and be happy and enjoy your life and wake up every day and be thankful that I survived. I've been back to Bali many times since the bombing, maybe 20, 30 years, 20, 30 times over the last 20 years. I love Bali and I think it's important to do things that you love, otherwise terrorism has beaten you.
Most of those killed were tourists, including 88 people from Australia, where a local memorial service was held as well. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was among the attendees of the ceremony in Sydney. On October 12, 2002, the al-Qaeda-linked militant group Jamaah Islamiyah set off bombs at the Sari Club and Paddy's Pub. A third explosion near the U.S. consulate in Denpasar caused minor damage. Winna Wong, HKIBC.
Myanmar's ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been sentenced to a further 3 years in jail for corruption. She now faces a total of 26 years behind bars on a number of charges ranging from incitement to graft. Suu Kyi's supporters accused the ruling generals of prosecuting her on trumped-up charges to keep her from returning to power. The 77-year-old democracy icon has been held in detention since a military coup in February last year. The Hong Kong stock market headed south for a fifth straight session, with investors disappointed that China is likely to stick to its zero-COVID policy. The Hang Seng Index plunged to a new 11-year low, dropping 2.3% at one stage before ending the day down 0.8%. Stocks linked to Britain had a bad day over conflicting reports whether the Bank of England will end its emergency bond purchases. Banking giant HSBC gave up 2.5%. CK Infrastructure, which derives almost half its sales from Britain, fell 5%, while CK Asset, which gets a quarter of its revenue from Britain, dropped 3.6%. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index was down 131 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent was down $1. Meituan was also down $1. AIA up $1.25. BYD Company up $6.10. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, euros at 7.62, pounds at 8.67, and Australian dollar at 4.91. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is down 27 points. The International Monetary Fund has sounded the alarm that financial stability risks are increasing.
The worst is yet to come, and for many people, 2023 will feel like a recession. The global economy continues to face steep challenges shaped by three powerful forces: the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the cost of living crisis caused by persistent and broadening inflation pressures, and the slowdown in China.
The IMF forecasts China's economic growth will be just 3.2% this year because of continued lockdowns and troubles in the property sector. The institution predicts a tiny growth of 0.5% for the 19-member Eurozone next year because of soaring energy costs resulting from the Ukraine conflict. The U.S. economy, meanwhile, is estimated to grow at a mere 1%, partly due to the series of interest rate hikes aimed at taming inflation. On to the weather now. Staying fine and dry in the coming days. Expect temperatures of 23 to 29 degrees tomorrow. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Wednesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Thanks for watching. Good night.